Welcome to episode 18 of 100 Years of Marine Corps Tankers, a station dedicated to honoring the legacy of Marine tankers and remembering the stories of what made the community special, told through the words of those Marines that towed the line. I am super excited to break into new territory on the channel, as I am joined by the first and one of the most senior tank mechanics in our community. Chief Warrant Officer 4 Lopez, Martin A. Lopez, it is my absolute pleasure to have you on the channel.
Thanks, JR, and thanks for inviting me. Appreciate the opportunity to come out here and share my story.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Happy to have you. As a Mexican-born individual who grew up in Colorado, what made you want to join the Marines in May of 1994?
Well, that's a great question. So after I graduated high school, I went to college, graduated junior college with a major in applied science and a minor in automotive mechanics. And at that time, I wanted to give something back to the country. I felt that I'd been very fortunate with the opportunities I had here, and I thought joining the military would be the best thing I can do. And of course, if I was going to join the military, I was going to join the best. And I went for the Marine Corps. I talked to the recruiter, and I wanted to leave 2 days after graduation. So graduated on a Friday, and I was at MEPS on Monday, ready to go.
Very nice. And then after MEPS, and you headed out to Fort Knox, where even back then, the community knew you were a rock star because you graduated top of your class and promoted to Lance Corporal. And then your initial 4 years, you spent out in 29 Palms with First Tanks. And the notes here say that you participated in numerous combined arms exercises, Steel Nights, company gunnery evolutions, and you impressively held the title of Ramp Chief for the companies of Alpha, Bravo, and Delta. That's quite a resume in the first 4 years of your time. What were some of your early impressions of the tank community and some epic stories about what makes the community special?
Well, the funny story is I was supposed to be a motor team mechanic, but sometime in between boot camp and MCT, they changed my MOS. So that whole stuff about putting it in writing, I don't think it always works out. But I was really glad that it did. I couldn't see myself as a motor team mechanic. Going the tank route was the way to go. I didn't know what I was getting into. I'll be honest with you. I had no idea what a tank did and what a tank turret technician is, what they used to call us back then. Talking to the MCT instructor, he was no help. He said, basically, you're going to sit on top of the tank with a grease gun and you're going to grease it as it spins. So I was like, okay, that doesn't sound exciting at all. But once I went through school, got through Fort Knox, went out to First Tanks. First thing was we work hard. You know, the beast needs to be fed constantly. There's always maintenance to do. The first 4 years, I don't remember very many weekends or holidays. There was always something to do, turning wrenches, and you worked your way out to the line company. You came into battalion maintenance. You know, if you showed some promise, you know, they would make you an 88 mechanic, and then you graduated to a tank mechanic at the battalion, and then once you were good enough, you would go down to the line company.
You know, I had the opportunity at Fort Benning to sit in on a couple of the classes just as an observer. And I sat in on the schematics class, and I will tell you that your world just blows me away. I mean, you guys are incredibly intelligent and just phenomenal. I mean, just within 2 classes, I was just absolutely floored. And the fact that, you know, you're taking, you know, relatively young individuals and giving them, you know, this much knowledge, this much tools between the schematics and the TMs and everything else, it's just phenomenal. I mean, I have absolute respect for mechanics, and, you know, every opportunity I get to spend with your community and my brothers and sisters I call mechanics. I mean, it's just phenomenal. At the end of this tour, you were promoted to sergeant and then headed out to 4th Tanks, where you served as a member of the instructor staff for Charlie Company. And
yes,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so funny story. I was there at First Tanks. I was only going to do 4 years, like everybody else, right? 26 years later, I'm still here, but I was going to do my 4 years, get out and do something out on the outside world. And I remember I was doing a service down at the wash route, and the Master Gunner Sergeant Dino retired. He came down and he said, "Hey, look at your ID card." And I said, "Oh, Master Guns, it's, you know, it says this date on it. So that's 3 days away. You haven't done all the stuff you're supposed to get out." So I was having so much fun, I didn't even realize that my EAS was coming up.
Wow.
And so he went in and talked to the company commander and extended me for 30 days so I could get my stuff done and exit the Marine Corps. But that 30 days turned into, well, stick around for another 6 months and help us out with water ops down in Pendleton. At that time, they used to do, the whole battalion would take turns going down to Pendleton for about a month each and conduct water ops. So then I came back from there, and the battalion maintenance officer was, he told me, what is it going to take to keep you in the Marine Corps? We really want you to stick around. Chief Officer Nelson, and I threw some stuff out there that I didn't think was going to stick. I said, I'd like to get a bonus. I'd like to get Boise, Idaho, I. So I never thought it would stick. I just wanted to put something out there. But he came back a couple of days later and he said, "You ready to re-enlist?" I said,
Nice.
I don't know. Didn't have a choice at that point. I said, "Yeah, I'm ready."
Very nice. I mean, I'm so happy we have you. That was a very momentous day. For those that don't know, inspector instructors are the active duty components to a reserve unit. The Marine company is actually comprised of a reservist. And I spent a little bit of time as an I&I on the tank side of the house, but I got to watch the mechanics, especially with the reservists. And working as a mechanic on the I&I staff, and then for the reservists, I can't even fathom how difficult it is between the complexities that the reserve mechanics have to deal with. I mean, everything I just described as far as all the knowledge they have to know, and the tank mechanics that do it every day have to go back and kind of research this. With these reservists, they're drilling reservists, so they're only there really 1 weekend out of the month, or if it's AT or gunnery. So it's even harder for them. So I guess my question here is, what was your experience kind of working with these individuals, and what is their secret for success, and being away from the vehicles for a month or longer?
Well, I tell you, I was impressed from day one, and just like you said, JR, they still have to do everything that we do on the active side. They still have all the annual training. They have the gunnery packages they have to go through, and they just have not even a quarter of the time to do it in. But I was impressed, from the time that they would step on deck, it was nonstop until they left. And I think that's what really, there was no white space, what we call white space time in between it. They were always doing something, and they would maintain those vehicles, sometimes even better than I'd seen it out in the fleet when it came down to preventive maintenance and stuff like that. So I was very impressed with the mechanics, and they wanted to be there. I think that's the biggest thing, is they wanted to be there and they wanted to learn. And they would take what we would give them and run with it.
The notes here say that shortly after your time in Boise, you were promoted to staff sergeant, and then you participated in what came to be the first urban combined arms exercise, which was conducted on aboard Fort Knox in Kentucky. And being that this is post 9/11, I imagine this was a result of the fighting that was seen in the stands, or Iraq as well, regarding the urban environment. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, so the company flew out to Fort Knox. We met up with the infantry, reserve infantry battalion. We conducted these ops in the Fort Knox area. Phenomenal courses down there. It was wide open. We can do pretty much anything that we wanted to in this urban environment. But it was definitely an eye opener to see how that tank, the infantry in that environment, how they have to support each other and everything that comes with it. We were also able to mount a couple of paintball guns on at least four of the tanks that we had there, in order to be able to shoot back at the infantry. They were always shooting at us, and we were able to shoot back. And I think those lessons learned really opened everybody's eyes down there as far as that whole package is concerned.
Yeah, and I'm sure that training paid dividends for years to come. 2004 was a busy year for you, because you were assigned to Fort Knox as an instructor for the M1A1 Tank Turret Technician course. And this is kind of the first time that I think your career kind of came full circle. Now you were responsible for making mechanics, and obviously you were very good at it, as you were awarded Instructor of the Month pretty regularly. What was your teaching style that proved to be so successful?
Well, JR, you've got the POI that's taught, and it's taught, by the book, but there's also stuff that you can go in there and teach. That's, the tricks of the trade that you've learned as you're going through through the tank yourself. When I came in the Marine Corps, the M1 was fairly new, so there was a lot of lessons learned. The staff NCOs that grew up on the 60s really didn't know much about the M1A1. So there was a generation there that we had to step up and learn this vehicle inside out. And I think that having done that prior to going over to teaching, I think that really helped me out and was able to set up these students, set them up for success as they went out to the fleet. I was kind of caught in the stop move there between I&I and Fort Knox, where I had to stay an extra year on I&I with the freeze. And I was really disappointed when I did get orders to Fort Knox. I wanted to get back out to the fleet. But ultimately, I ended up taking the orders out to Fort Knox and short touring there. I was able to leave there 2 years, just 2 years into my my tour duty and go back out to the fleet.
And that takes us to 2006, where you headed back out to First Tanks. And there you served as the maintenance chief for Bravo Company, and then deployed in support of OAF 6.2, which was certainly a heck of a deployment. During this deployment, you were promoted to the rank of gunnery sergeant and subsequently selected to the warrant officer program. First question here is what were some of your early memories of this deployment and some of the thoughts that come to your mind?
So this deployment, this is what got me out of Fort Knox. I got a call from First Tanks maintenance chief. It was Master Guns Bagnitsky at the time out there, and he gave me a call and said there's an opening. The maintenance chief that was supposed to deploy is hurt his back, and he won't be able to make the deployment. If you can talk to the schoolhouse into letting you go early, we've got a place for you to go out here. So we were able to do that. Showed up to First Tanks, went to Bravo Company, and we started our workups right away. But one of the things that we did a little bit different is we integrated a lot of our mechanics with the crews. At least every platoon had one or two mechanics integrated with them as part of the crew. And I think once we got out to Iraq, that paid dividends. Just having that mechanic, having the knowledge, having his tools. A lot of times we didn't even get the call back to the rear. They had already fixed the vehicle and they were back out. And so I know everybody says this about their crew when they have a team, but I think that was the dream team, no doubt. We had mechanics in the CO's tank, mechanics in the XO's tank. The master gunner had his own tank. We had mechanics, almost all mechanics in his crew. But that was one of the things that stuck out, definitely.
Having lived that and experienced that firsthand, I will tell you that was an absolute force multiplier, because the operations that we were running, took us out, all over creation, and being that far away from a COC or being that far away from the forward operating base, and having something that is outside of first echelon maintenance that, we as tankers don't have the ability to fix. Have your mechanic come over and be able to fix that tank on the fly, on the move, in the middle of the theater, hell, in the middle of combat, is just an absolute force multiplier. And if someday we ever get to this point again, I would definitely recommend that'd be a lesson learned and something that we put in the book for how to part 2.
Absolutely.
And then, like I said before, you were selected to warrant officer program. What made you want to become a warrant officer?
So, growing up, you always, there's always things that you don't like, that, policy changes for maintenance or whatever the case may be that you see that could be done better. And I just remember one day as a sergeant, complaining to the master sergeant, we should be able to do it this way. This makes more sense. And he looked at me and he said, if you want to change things, then you need to become a warrant officer. You guys are the ones that write the policy. We enforce it, and I'm talking maintenance policy, but you guys are the ones that set the tone for that. And so that kind of opened my eyes a little bit and said, okay, maybe that's the route I want to go. And so I submitted a package before deploying to Iraq. Had no idea I had been selected. Somewhere between the retrograde back, the board let out, and the first thing the colonel told me when we hit March Air Force Base, Colonel Stopa, said, "Congratulations, you got selected. You're going to TBS in January, but not before going to Steel Night one more time."
Gotcha. So, like you mentioned, 2008 probably joined the ranks of the Ground Ordnance Maintenance Officer Program. And it's important to note that for those that do not know, you graduated there with a military occupational specialty of 2110. And 2110s are truly the mechanical and technical experts of all ground combat equipment in the Marine Corps. It's a huge accomplishment, and it's something that definitely speaks volumes of who you are personally, but also who the community you are that you came from. Because everything from AAVs to LAR to tanks, hell, I mean, you guys work on the howitzer too, right? One.
So on the house you have your 2120s. They grew up in the armory, armor community. We right now in the program office, I do have the HIMARS and some of these other platforms under my portfolio also.
Yeah, it's so impressive. 2008, you went over to we'll say a competitor of tanks, one of our sisters, 3rd AAV Battalion Delta Company, Amphibious Assault Battalion, 29 Palms. And here you served as the company executive officer, family readiness officer, and maintenance officer. So a lot of key billets there, communication officer and ordnance officer. So I'm going to load this question up. How was third tracks different from tanks?
Well, a lot of difference. The attitude, I think, is the same. We always want to, and I say fix far forward. That's the key phrase that I grew up with. You fix your equipment as far forward as possible in the field or in combat. So they kind of had the same mindset, and I really like that. Just a different platform. I think that obviously the tank is way more complicated, way more moving parts, but it was easy to go from tanks over to AAVs because logistics, I think nobody does it better than the tank community across the board when it comes to logistics. We know what we have to take. We know the size of the footprint. We know our toolkits. We know POLs. So it doesn't matter where we go. We're always thinking that whether we're operators or mechanics, I think the operators, when they go on Muse, that's the first thing they ask, where's my stuff? Mm-hmm. I need X, Y, and Z to be able to operate. So having grown up in the tank community, it was really easy to transfer that over to the AV community.
Do they acknowledge that we own Yat-Yaz?
Oh, I used to remind them every day.
August 10th, 2010, Chief Warrant Officer Lopez was now reassigned to 1st Tank Battalion as the tank maintenance officer. And then you deployed as part of the battalion enabling team responsible for preparing the battle space for the induction of the M1A1 main battle tank into Afghanistan area of operation. So we already heard from Colonel Storer on this challenge, getting tanks into Afghanistan. What were the challenges that you personally experienced?
But again, I'm going to echo what he said. It was just getting the gear that we needed for the company to come in and the gear that was serviceable. There was a lot of gear out there, but it was not all serviceable. And getting the right gear to the right place, and just making sure that everything was ready to go when this company landed. And I think that was prior to GCSS, so there was a lot more manual paperwork that you had to do in order to get the gear to certain accounts or get the gear inducted into maintenance. And that was some of the challenges, and it carried on to the company. They had to do the same thing once they got the gear and once they were out there.
2011, you once again deployed in support of the NATO training mission to Afghanistan, and this time you were a logistics advisor for the second of the 2-1 Kandak of the Afghan National Civil Order or Police. So the Kandaks are our equivalent of companies, and they can even get as large as battalions, and they're structured very much the same. So as a logistics advisor, I'm sure you were very tasked out as they were just kind of now forming a lot of these Kandaks and getting some of the gear and support from the NATO allies. How did your experience in tanks, and particularly in the ground ordnance, prepare you for your advisor role in the Kandaks?
So what the teams did, we flew into Kabul first, and we met up with the Kandaks during their what they call their pre-deployment training. And so that was very key. That was very key for us to go in there and get to meet them, get to work with them, get to account for their gear. What gear set were they taking down south? And so we worked that out for a few months prior to the deployment, what they considered their deployment. We were already deployed, but so then they deployed to the south. And just having worked with tanks, again, the big logistical footprint that comes with moving a company or a battalion of tanks to the field, you can apply it to anything. And I think that was key, just getting those guys on the same sheet of music, thinking, how many trucks, how much fuel, what do you have to take with you? And I think that was definitely good to know before going down there.
2013, you once again went to our sisters over there as a maintenance officer for the Assault Amphibious School Battalion, Camp Pendleton, California, where you served as the ordnance officer, maintenance management officer, arms, ammunition, and explosives officer. So once again, they got you, and you carried a heck of a number of hats and billets there. 2016, you went to our other sisters, which was the 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance, LAR, the Highlanders. Here you served as battalion maintenance officer, and this is also where you were selected to the rank of Chief Officer 4, something to be very proud of. And then July 2017 till present, you're currently working as the maintenance officer for the Fire Program Management Office for the Ground Combat Element Systems, Marine Corps Systems Command. And that's a long way of saying that you were very close in this whole process to the divestment of armor in the Marine Corps. And I know that you wear that pretty heavy, and it was a heck of a responsibility. But you and I had some conversations previously that I think is very important to kind of get out there. More importantly for the junior Marines. As someone who had the task of being directly involved in the divestment of armor of the Marine Corps, were there any special considerations or provisions made to take care of our junior Marines?
So I think the biggest thing we wanted to do was get rid of the gear as soon as once the word came down and the documents were signed and the battalions went into a C5 non-training status. The focus shifted to let's get the equipment out of the battalions and get these Marines out so they can lat move, they can do inter-service transfer. But there was no need to keep the gear on there. The longer you keep the gear somewhere, somebody still has to maintain it and account for it. So we did a big push, and we got most of it. We got about 70% of it by the end of the FY moved and back into the hands of the Army. And so I think that allowed, at least from what I could see, it allowed a lot of the Marines to go ahead and do an inter-service transfer or lat move to a different MOS or EAS if that was their goal. But that was our focus once we found out that we were divesting of the entire fleet.
That's a perfect example of who you are and your mantra, taking care of the Marines, because you personally took that on, and that's important to note because that freed those Marines up. And as the gear exits, yes, it's extremely painful, and like I've said before, it's like losing a loved one. And closing up these battalions has been very, very akin to funerals, because literally, our community is going away. But at the same time, taking care of Marines is what we do, and that decision that you made and the efforts that you personally put forward to make sure that these Marines could leave sooner than later is really kind of remarkable. And like I said, this channel has a message, and the message as well as anybody. For someone who is very closely involved in divestment decisions, what is your message for today's Marines that are making the tough decision on what to do post divestment of Marine Corps armor?
Well, like I said before, I think the tank community is unique. It's special, whether you're a tank mechanic, an operator, or just any other support MOS within a tank battalion. The stuff that you learn there will carry on to any MOS. The dedication that the Marines have in a tank battalion, I've seen it with the mechanics, I've seen it with the operators. There's no doubt in my mind they can take any MOS and succeed and be successful and just knock it out of the ballpark. That's just the drive. That's who they are. That's who tankers are, and that's who the tank community is. We just, regardless of the task, we're going to always knock it out of the park.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna take a moment here to thank you personally for coming on here. I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate the message you came on and provided. Thank you to the community. Thank you to everyone who has supported the channel, continues to support the channel. Please subscribe if you've not already done so. And to the mechanics in particular, Chief Warrant Officer Lopez just set the bar for you all. So please contact me. I would love to have more mechanic stories on here. I have one of the best, but every mechanic has a story, and every mechanic has my absolute respect and love. So please continue to contact me and come on here.
Well, JR, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our wonderful field service representatives that we've had throughout the years. Those guys were key and have been key in molding our young maintainers and operators. I've seen a lot of the operators go over there for advice from the early days of John Jascolini and Robert Banton over at Second, and now the GD guys there, Mark Bianchi, John Rouse, Greg Lemon, Don Corp, all those guys. And then obviously we hired, once we started putting some more modifications on the tanks, we hired some additional FSRs, and that's where Ryan Hillard's been there since the beginning. Jay Carosha started out there in 29 Palms, and now it's Nate Bailey. And then our M88 FSRs, just a ton of knowledge, Kevin Halcrow and Tom Reed. And those guys have been awesome throughout the years supporting the tank community. And they're truly going to be missed. But I just want to make sure that we included them in this. That a lot of the kids are out there are better off for having known these gentlemen.
Absolutely. I happen to be one of those. I've worked with almost all those names, and phenomenal individuals, just truly professional, absolute experts in their craft and their field. And like you said, there are Marines that are alive today because of the efforts of those gentlemen. And absolutely, I appreciate you saying that. With that, my friend, what parting comments do you have?
Thanks again. This is great what you're doing. I think we have to capture the legacy of tanks. Well, it's still fresh in our minds. Some of us are getting older than others. We forget a lot more, but this is absolutely a must. And I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for everything that you're doing for the community.
It's my pleasure. And like I said, thank you. I appreciate the time. With that, we'll be signing off, and Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.